Hello, I'm Jenna. I have a master's degree in media and culture, which means for the last 5 years I've been studying horror media and video game cultures. What does that mean? Well, basically it means I'm one of a handful of people in America who's authorized to talk to you about zombies. No, wait, come back. I know, listen, I know. You're thinking over the last 85 years or so, zombie stories have gotten a little bit played out, but that's only because you're not thinking about it through the eyes of a media theorist. We're actually in the midst of an entirely new cycle of zombie media, and it's really interesting. Let me explain. A cornerstone truth about horror is that it reflects the crises of the culture it's made in. Generally speaking, the more cultural anxiety there is, the more horror media is produced and consumed. But horror movies rarely deal with crises head-on. Cinema relies on structuring absences, a concept pioneered by sociologist and film theorist Annette Kuhn. Movies often skirt around the very historical events that give them meaning. So a movie that's reacting to, say, fears about Cold War communist infiltration won't mention the Cold War at all. Instead, it will be about alien pod people with sinister intentions. The fear is projected onto a metaphor. This is why a zombie story told in 1932 will differ from a zombie story told in 1968 or 2018. The set dressing stays roughly the same, half-dead people lurching about, but the differences are a reflection of society at that time, like a snapshot of somebody's nightmare. So even though zombies have existed in American media for over 80 years now, each cycle of zombies is vastly different. White Zombie, the earliest appearance of zombies in a full-length movie, was about the supposed superiority of Western imperialism, similar to what you'd see in H.P. Lovecraft's writing during the same time period. Night of the Living Dead was a little bit about the Vietnam War and a little bit about the American Civil Rights Movement. Dawn of the Dead was about rampant, mindless consumerism. The Serpent and the Rainbow was about racist and imperialist American propaganda placing blame on Haiti for the AIDS epidemic, and post-9/11 zombie movies were a reaction to Americans remembering that war isn't just something that happens elsewhere in the world. Across cinematic genres, America became obsessed with imagery of half-destroyed buildings and rubble, and dust-laden cities and people running in the streets. We had a whole subculture of survivalists arise from these fears. Now, all of those examples are cinematic. The conversation gets a little bit stickier when you're talking about video games because zombies are so often a mechanic and less of a metaphor. Zombies are the perfect enemy. They're endless, easily customizable in design and strength, and there's no real moral quandary to slaughtering them en masse. But step back and look at the trend in video game plots, and you'll see an interesting change. In both video games and cinema over the last 8 years or so, we've moved away from the post-9/11 total apocalypse society is over stories.
We've taken back the southern seaboard, and we're winning.
Modern zombie media is struggling with the fact that Americans thought the world was going to end, and then it didn't. Everybody picked back up and continued living. They built lives and started families and wanted to tell stories about that instead. Part of this change in video games goes hand in hand with the so-called dadification of the medium, in which many developers and the perceived audience of the games have grown up and are reaching a child-rearing age. So the stories they wanted to tell involve growing up and starting to have children. BioShock went from daughters and daddies are terrifying to I have a daughter, she changed me. Kratos went from conquering Olympus in 2005 to having a kid in 2018. And more importantly, you have stories about father-daughter style relationships in zombie apocalypses, like The Last of Us and Telltale Games' The Walking Dead. These aren't stories about survivors just trying to make it to the next checkpoint. They're about finding a community to keep each other safe. The State of Decay franchise is a great example of this. Just the title clues you into the fact that this isn't like other zombie games. There's a state, a location-based, organized community. These games are a natural evolution of the zombie story. Both State of Decay 1 and 2 allow you to play not as one character, but as anyone in a community. You are not a survivor, you are a community of survivors, and your goal is to strengthen that community. To quote Polygon's own Colin Campbell, I am me, but also, I am them. A part of the overarching plot of State of Decay 2 involves finding a cure for a specific zombie bite, a mechanic that shifts the idea of infection from the inevitable endpoint of all survivors to a bad situation that is not a hindrance to our longevity as a species. That's why it's interesting that one of the teasers for The Last of Us 2 includes a leader using shorthand slang to meter out internal justice.
Clip her wings.
A sure sign of community, however warped. Incidentally, I believe the next big trend in horror will be stories about cults, but that's another video. It's also probably part of the reason building has become such a popular mechanic in video games, even in genres that don't normally feature them. But that's also part of this broader cultural shift. You build things and have children because you have hope about the future. And that's all good news. It means that we, or at least our media, or at least the people who make our media, are feeling hopeful about the future too. A lot of apocalyptic media was starting to feel more like a wish than a fear, and wanting the world to be destroyed so you can play out large-scale power fantasies is dark. Like, that's some dark shit, and that's what we've been living with. Well, we're starting to want to tell stories about moving on and rebuilding and getting on with our lives, and you know what? We deserve it. If you're anything like me, this is a big relief. So take a break, shoot some zombies, build a house. You've earned it. Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you like and subscribe to Polygon? There's all sorts of other offerings that we have on the table, like this thing. Maybe this thing.